All right. Well, it's 3 o'clock, so we should launch into it. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this year's slightly unusual Bardic College Moot. So, I don't have exactly a massive agenda for this. I'm referring to notes from last year's Bardic Moot, but it's more or less just going to be a round table talking about the state of Bardic in Eldamare. So one of the things I will say, the main point I wanted to get to is, so previous years we've talked about the importance of having essentially, Bardic leadership at circles. So having a patron and a sort of moderator or circle leader, for lack of a better phrase. And I think the Bardic circles of the last year and our current, online Bardic circles, I think have proven that to be the winning solution. I think we've had some very successful Bardic circles as a result of having, clearly stating patrons who's sort of running it and organizing it, what the expectations are of performers, etc. I think that's helped a lot. And despite the fact that, I can only see you through the magic portals here, the Bardic has actually, I think, this is probably better than it's been in quite some time. So, although like I said, I would like to hear your thoughts on the subject of where we think Bardic is in the kingdom.
Well, as far as the having a patron as well as a circle leader or host, that I'm like, that's my jam. I'm really happy that it seems like the kingdom has sort of picked up culturally on that as a thing, that it's not just, we're lucky in Ramshaven here that Penn and Lucia are really excellent supporters and patrons of Bardic circles, but that, their highnesses are now their majesties, right from the outset with these online Bardics have made it clear that they're the patrons of the circle, and then have been picking different ones amongst us to be the moderator, both, the technological moderator and also the sort of the circle host. So I don't know how other people are finding it, but I don't know if other people have as many opinions as I do.
It's a pity that the virtual means doesn't really allow for us to sing together. It's solo performance, and such. But that's just the nature of the beast for the moment. I certainly don't have an answer to how there can be all of us singing together online in a virtual presence. The computer lag just doesn't allow for it.
Yeah, I believe Magister Marie, she was experimenting. There was a program called I think it was called Jam Kazam or something of that ilk,
Yeah,
which was designed explicitly for musicians to perform together online. Although that got put on a back burner due to some health issues that she had. From what I understand, though, it's not terribly, I wouldn't even say user friendly, but it's very complex.
Yeah,
There's a lot of things that need to be adjusted so that to deal with latency issues.
And I think it's designed specifically for bands, so like a smaller jazz ensemble or a 4-piece rock band, as opposed to something as potentially large as a choir or Bardic stuff. But we just can't, until technology gets better or everyone has, instant, fantastic internet, we're just not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I have to say that I've really been enjoying the electronic because I miss out on Bardic most of the time. Just either it's not happening at events that I get to, or I'm someplace like cleaning up in the kitchen. So it's nice to actually be able to do it for a change. And I've actually been doing more, digging out stories, looking at old poetry, getting out music that I've not played in years, thinking about when the next Bardic event is going to be, because it's fun again in a way that it hasn't been for a very long time. And as my daughter will reassure you, the fact that I can't hear everybody else singing when we sing in groups doesn't mean that it's a solo performance for whoever's leading it. I'm belting it out in my bedroom. And that's actually one of the nice things too, because I don't know all the words to things, and being able to look them up quickly because I have access to the online sources or my notebooks that I don't carry with me to events is also nice.
That's true.
Yeah, I've personally found I find some of this stressful. There's been even articles that have showed people studying just how these kinds of interactions confuse our brains because we see people but we're not actually with people, and it's worse than just a telephone call where we know that there's a separation and whatnot. And I find some of my anxiety gets heightened on these calls, but I've also found it absolutely amazing as someone who's been a part of the Bardic community and usually only gets to see my Bardic friends maybe once a year, being able to actually see and hear and interact with bards literally from all over the known world in some of the other Bardics is just phenomenal.
It does kind of seem like the way that, say, at Penzik or some similar event, that you can hop Bardic circles in one night or go to a different one every night from different kingdoms, different baronies. Now we can do that online. I know last year, one of the things that I hated the most about only being able to go to one camping event was that meant I only got to sing with my favorite people once in an entire year, and it sucked. Now I've had more access in the last month or two than I had in the previous 2 or 3 years. I would love to keep online Bardic as something just on the side that in no way is a replacement for in-person Bardic circles.
And I have to say, from the point of view of what I've been hearing from some of the people who are less comfortable presenting themselves and stepping forward to actually perform, that the ease of being able to just shut off the camera while they're performing, and the ease of being able to just send a message to a moderator to say, could I please, could you please help me step up, is a lot easier and has allowed a lot more people to perform than have been able to step up prior, even though they may have some wonderful material.
Absolutely. I think I agree with you, Grillick, entirely, that I hope that these online Bardic spaces will persist. And indeed, I can't imagine the Kingdom's going to get rid of the Kingdom Zoom account anytime soon. So it's perfectly likely that, I mean, as much as so far it's been their Majesties have been doing the Kingdom Bardic, but there's no reason any one of us can't go and send a message to Mistress Lucia, no, not that one, and basically say, hey, can we use the Zoom account for such and such date? So, along those lines, I'm thinking, so are people finding, I just remembered because, Rodrigo being up in my top left here, for resources for finding song lyrics and song tunes, are people finding that finding any sort of challenges in that regard?
I've found that the online Bardics are actually being really nice for that, because people, when you ask someone for lyrics for a song, they can just paste it into the chat.
I'm seeing that, but not so much the song lines. And frankly, part of the reason for that is so many of us who don't write the song lines. Like, they don't write the musical notation. So that makes it more difficult. But the lyrics, yeah, I'm finding everywhere people are being very generous with their lyrics.
I think as time goes on, more and more of that is accumulating on websites and such, and so you can Google the first line of a song that you remember, and it will give you 5 different options for what it might be.
Yeah, we've
I
come
think that's
a long way from, like, when I was just getting into Bardic, was still in the era that the most secure way of getting lyrics from someone was going up to them behind the Bardic circle fire while you were still there and saying, "Can you tell me those lyrics?" and carrying notepaper with you and a pen, and transcribing it in the dark by firelight, because you might not cross paths again, and you might not actually know them, and not everybody had emails, and I'm a million years old.
And you had to go uphill both ways, and you used to like it.
But like, even just being able to reliably have email changed how much sharing of stuff people did. And I think now that we're doing this sort of face-to-face stuff, it helps us connect who the performer is that's doing the piece, or even better, we're going to be able to see the people who actually wrote the pieces doing their own performance, and we can say, like, that's really cool, where do I find your lyrics? And I know I've found it, if anything, it's a little overwhelming just trying to keep track of all the websites that have the lyrics. There's the Callan song one, and then there's Mistress Rosalind personal one, which has 1 million songs, and there's the various Eldemir publications that we've put out, and they're not always on the website in the same spot all the time. And
would that be something worth looking into, making, to do a sort of like how Justinian has bards.ca, doing something as part of the Kingdom website as a repository of, not necessarily of all songs, but like at the least songs by Eldemirian bards?
Well, that's what bards.ca was in its first inception, was where people like Hector and Garrett and Marion and myself and people who just were writing 1 or 2 pieces all could put lyrics up in one spot. And I know that bards.ca is in this weird half-dead holding position, and we need to really, like, we either need to very explicitly talk to Uncle Jay about what we'd hope to see it, because the domain is still there, or we need to do something different. Maybe not with the website itself. Maybe we could make a sub-wiki of the Eldemir wiki for Bardic, so that people can go in and upload their own stuff.
Absolutely, we could definitely do that. I did actually talk with Uncle Jay at Winter War, and he is perfectly amenable to updating bards.ca to whatever we decide we want it to be. The one big issue was with posting lyrics is basically legal permissions of getting the composer, the songwriters, the poets permission to actually write, because some of these people don't play anymore, and there's no guarantee that they, it's just like, why are you posting? I never want to see this crap again.
Yeah, and that's a problem in any digital publication.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have thought that just lyrics would have been covered under fair use, but
If
One
they're
thing I've
written by
seen
somebody who's
done-
still alive, it's their intellectual property.
right.
Someone
However,
What I'm trying to do is that people just say, hey, if you don't like this being up here, notify us that you are the copyright holder and we'll take it down. I don't know how much of a defense that is. But
Yeah, that's the problem.
Generally, you have to prove damages that you have by using this intellectual property. You have deprived the originator of it of income that they would have had from it, or you have besmirched the reputation of the originator. So there may be ways around it, but I'm not a lawyer.
I think for current stuff, if I upload my, for example, Two Harps poem into this wiki, then that's a clear indication that I want that to be there. Now, this doesn't have anything to say about Hector's old material or Cordigan's old material, or etc. But that's at least part of the answer.
Mhm.
Whatever we do, I would like to see us including the actual music rather than just the lyrics wherever possible. I find it really, really frustrating just to have lyrics for a tune I don't know. And as somebody who prefers to play over sing, I'd really rather have those so that I could actually practice on an instrument. So
Now,
that would be my bit for it.
Now, do you mean actually like written annotation, or would
Yes.
you be satisfied with like a MIDI link where you could hear it?
I'm older than Emer, so I am not as familiar with a MIDI link. It might be fine.
Basically, a recording, like if there was a link to a YouTube video of the person
Yeah.
performing it. Yeah.
That would probably be okay. Because I can then from there transcribe it myself if I like it enough.
Yeah, one of the problems that I personally have is I have forgotten my music theory literally 3 times over. I can compose new songs. I come up with tunes from my head. I will write them and then I will sing them into my phone with the recording app, and I basically learn by ear. I learn my own stuff by ear. And don't have the skills to do the actual notation. This is where if Rufus was a part of this chat, he would want to be beating me over the head though, because we do have people in Kingdom who are willing to do that for us if we get them recording. So
If it makes you feel
but
better, I can beat you over the head for him.
no, it's fine. He takes opportunities when he gets them. We do have a couple of archivists. Rufus specifically, if people don't know who have been writing stuff but don't do the musical notation thing. I think because of Mistress Rhiannon's untimely death, Rufus has made it sort of a personal mission that no one else's music will be lost. So I'm just...
But on the other hand, getting together with Rufus when he has time can be a real challenge.
Yeah, but again, with digital technologies, we can send recordings to each other.
For me, I can write down the notes, but the timing is, it's one long bar.
Yeah.
To be fair, music theory notwithstanding, there is a free program that I've recently been using called MuseScore, which is, so it's a free program, and it's basically you can create sheet music and you can play it, essentially. Like you press play and it goes over the notes, right? So you can hear what it sounds as if it was being played on a piano. Here, I'll
Or
type it.
any instrument. Yep.
I put it into the chat. So Muse as in like the Greek muses and then score. And because I've been using it since I have Mondays off thanks to the pandemic. Having a 4-day weekend constantly is very odd. So every Monday, Lord Shimazu, who is he has a post-secondary degree in music, has very kindly been tutoring me in music theory. So we've been using that right. But if you want transcribing music, it's honestly it's a pretty simple. Like I'm not, the last time I did music theory was like 8th grade, and I'm going, yeah, this is pretty self-explanatory for the most part. So that is a thing for people who if they want to have a hand in trying to write out their music, I recommend it.
Yeah, it's a lot easier reading it than writing it.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Also,
I can't disagree with you there.
Also with MuseScore, if you pay for the premium one, you can transpose it into different keys instantly, which is wonderful if you're playing something like a recorder with a limited range, or where the higher notes are particularly difficult to play. You can shift it into a key that works better.
That's good to know.
That's cool.
So going back to your point, Emer, do we want to actually start creating sort of a Bardic lyrics page on the Eldermere Wiki? Would that be helpful?
I think that would be good, because then it's also in some ways it gets around some of the copyright things, because people are putting up their own works.
Right, and the current operating philosophy of the wiki, certainly for persona pages, is that you don't upload a person's page. Either they do it themselves or you do it with their express permission.
Yeah.
So I think we can take a similar approach.
I mean, there certainly are going to be challenges with some of the people who don't play in the SCA anymore. Many of them, like I know how I would go about getting in touch with Cordigan if we wanted to do that. Like I know a guy who knows the guy. As far as Hector is concerned, that's a great big weird black pit where communication goes to die, and it has been for about 2 or 3 years, and I don't know what to do about that. Fortunately, we already have publications with most of his stuff, or at least his popular stuff, that exist. So also in this wiki, I would want to include links to all of the Cry of the Wolf publications, the Ramshaven Songbook, things like that. Because that has inherent permission built into it.
Right, because it's already been published.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But only in that format. So we can include links to that format. But like the first Cry of the Wolf that was put together, I don't think we can republish it with a new look, because then we'd need to get all new permissions again.
Yep, I think you're right on that one.
But at least it exists, and possibly if it was on the Kingdom Documents page and in a sort of a Bardic subsection of the Eldermere Wiki, that would make it more accessible to people.
Yeah, and we can also link from the wiki to the Kingdom page any sort of, so if we collect these Cry of the Wolves and other songbooks and get them, because we can easily ask Lucia to put them up on part of the Kingdom documents, and then we can link them from the wiki.
They are, or if they're not now, they have been in the past.
Okay.
But also things like the Ramshaven booklet that was pulled together, like a year or 2 ago.
Yep, and that's on the ramshaven.ca site.
It's on the Ramshaven page, and I don't know if there's others that you might be able to put together another sort of sub page for general choir work, choral music, like rounds.
And also stories and poetry as separate items as well.
Yes, that's actually something that I think we're short on within the Kingdom is storytelling as bards. We focus really heavily on singing, but we don't pay as much attention to the storytelling or the poetry side of things.
The one problem that I find with the storytelling though is that I find often that the audiences aren't as receptive to stories as they are to songs. Stories tend to be longer, and having told a few stories and watching your audience continue on with their own conversations, and basically ignoring the presentation is a little daunting and a little discouraging. So it's story the singing is because it's a group activity is much more popular. Storytelling is at least for me, I found it to be a little more difficult, especially if your stories are longer than your average song length.
Well, to be honest, most stories are longer than the average song. The rule of thumb is kind of, if you can keep it to 2 to 3 minutes, then you're good, which is hard to do with stories. It's very hard to do with stories.
It's not just an Eldermere issue.
Right.
And some of it I think is also audience training. Can we say that? Some of it is, I don't want to insult any one individual because that's not what this is about. But I think that Eldermere audience right now is lacking a little bit of audience etiquette. It's hard to even do one solo performance without having the general audience be frustrated because it's not something that everyone can sing along to all the time. And I think we need to kind of train our audience that there's time for all of the Bardic arts and that there's enjoyment to be had in all the different forms and that they're all important to be included.
I think also it's because our modern not say attention span, but our modern way of paying attention is largely visual. That's how we take entertainment, is largely visual. Whereas in the past it was largely like in the Middle Ages it was largely oral, that's how you got your news. That's how, and people would listen to stories because listening was something that they did more often, I guess. Today we see our as an audience, we're more used to taking in information visually as well as orally. So quite frankly, it's almost saying as like our modern person doesn't have quite the attention span anymore to sit and to just listen. And I think that's what it comes down to. A lot of people just have difficulty just sitting and listening if there isn't something visually stimulating and grabbing their attention. So how do you train an audience for that?
Well, this is so in part of it's. I hate to phrase it this way, but I can't think of anything else right off the top of my head. It's part of the responsibility of the raconteur, the performer, to get up and command the attention. So one of the advantages to being a singing bard is that when we stand up and launch into song, this is not the normal way that people communicate. And so we automatically have attention. When a poet or a storyteller gets up and tells a story, they have to somehow grab the attention and maintain it, whether it's by large gestures or great modulation of voice. They have to be able to maintain it, which is a lot harder to do when you're telling a story in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I was going to say I think there's two separate things that are involved in oration, whether it's poetry or storytelling. And some of it is attention span. Because most songs take a lot less time than we even think they do. Many songs come in under 2 minutes. Like they might be emotionally charged at the time of singing, but they are fast. Getting someone to listen to a longer ballad even is a challenge as a performer. But storytelling and poetic oration can still be visual, and again, this is sort of like how our own culture feeds into itself. There are other kingdoms which have stronger storytellers and a stronger storytelling culture. And in part, I think that's because their storytellers are very actively working on the performance of storytelling. I know some East Kingdom people that would have workshops every single week with each other to work on storytelling, and they would actually like sort of shout out, "No, you're not moving your arms enough," or "Make sure you're connecting with your audience," or you know, "You have to move more, you know, take a couple steps back or steps forward," or you know. And the performance training is something that I don't know how to go about offering or encouraging, especially when we're not able to get together.
In some ways, that's one of the things that could work really, really well through a Zoom get-together, though. Mm-hmm. Like, it's harder to do the physical stuff. And I know this because I told the story at Bardic a couple of weeks ago, and I was struggling because I was doing it on Zoom, and usually there's big arm things and there's some running that happens and so on. And I couldn't do that and still be on the camera. So yes, it's harder from that perspective, but I think that in terms of just practicing and workshopping with each other, that might actually be something we could do as a group in a Zoom evening or 2 or 8.
Well, I suspect also that actually for Bardic circles, resuming trying to resume the tradition of storytelling as well will be easier, because it's, well, more of a captive audience. You know, I mean, if you're in a situation like this, I mean, people are stopping to hear me talk right now, whereas were we in an actual circle sitting around a table, for example, there would be side conversations going on, which is exactly what Valdr was saying about when he's performing a story. But here in a Zoom, we're very aware of whether it's an etiquette or a desire to not miss something, or a greater need for connectivity right now. I think now would be a great time for the storytellers to step up and take their place in the Zoom circles.
And
I believe you had a comment.
This is also not a new problem. When Master Name was performing 20 years ago, he would sit down, play his harp or baran or even just tell a story. There would be side conversations going on in the hall and just noise and so, and that was one of the things that one of the reasons why he stopped showing up for the SCA, because the courtesy from the audience just wasn't there.
So I guess the question then becomes, how do we train the audience? Because
therapy.
I think it's very hard to train an audience.
Retrophrenology?
It's rather like trying to train a cat. It's better to accept what they are. It strikes me that some of the stuff that you're talking, there's an area in acting where you bring in a dramaturge, they're called. I don't know too much about it. But say, for example, somebody is creating a one-person show. They may very well have one or two dramaturges come in, work with them on their material to make sure that it will keep the audience's attention. We're living in a time when most of our audience were brought up on sound bites from Sesame Street with elaborate effects and puppetry and colors, and I think you have to say, I'm going to be doing competition against that, so I better be pretty blinking good. Just a thought.
I think that it's also a bit, though, of like, you know, a lot of people will make a blanket statement that Bardic circles don't like period music, but we've outright proven that that's not true. I think you're right, though, that some of it is how it's presented and how it's chosen. I mean, knowing it's an entirely different type of training, to know the audience, to read the room, and know what piece is going to fly best in this moment, versus how I'm going to perform any given piece. Because if it's difficult to workshop and train performance, it's 10 times that to try to help someone learn how to read the audience or read the room. But it doesn't just, but blanket statements like people don't listen to stories or people won't enjoy period music are us just hurting ourselves.
One thought that occurred to me, actually, back to commanding the room and these sort of things, is stories and poems require a certain level of acoustic cooperation that even songs don't. Because a lot of our event sites do not have great acoustics, right? Where, I mean, I can get people going with Rise pretty much anywhere because it just involves me being loud. But storytelling, I can't, well, I mean, I'm sure I could just, yell, and then they went over, but that's not really storytelling, that's just bellowing, right? And if I don't have that sort of acoustic cooperation, even a really great storyteller may find their audience not paying attention just because they can't bloody hear the thing, right? And I don't think there's, it's a bit of a pipe dream to expect, event planners to try and find sites to perfectly accommodate acoustics, but that is, a problem that's neither the fault of the audience nor the performer that we should be aware of.
I wonder if we could test the acoustics of commonly used halls in Eldamir for storytelling. If some point, if a couple of bards were to be part of the setup staff the night before, and just be like, would it be better to be over here or over there? And then we can have kind of notes for future.
It's something
The problem with that,
so many event sites are literally just boxes of concrete. That it's a problem that we have with court too. The acoustics just don't work well in school gymnasiums or church halls.
Especially with people standing in the back talking all the time.
Or people are eating at feast, right? And it's not fair to say that they have to stop eating.
And then Outdoor Circle has entirely different issues that range from there is nothing that the sound bounces off of to there are mosquitoes. So
But again,
Could
the whole
we-
thing about performing at feast is acoustics aside and all that. Again, I'm going to go back to Emer's point of part of it is also audience etiquette. And being someone who got up to tell a story at a feast, and while the story is going on, watching the head table itself completely ignoring the story and having their other conversations about whatever it was, while trying to entertain the hall. When the hall sees that, it really doesn't. It sends the wrong kind of message, and it's, as performers, it's really easy to feel in the end that what you do is not valued by your community.
So I think one of the things that we could think about doing more regularly, and we used to do this up in Caldrithig years ago, was part of the butler's job was to make sure about entertainment, but you didn't necessarily have to play to the whole hall. So as a storyteller, I would often tell a story just to head table or just to one or two of the side tables. If people were not in the mood and there was lots of chatting going on and it was a noisy hall, I didn't try to project to the whole hall and tell the story. I told to maybe 16 people whose attention I could keep. And that was it. And that worked well, whether it was an announced thing or not, just to work in smaller groups. So maybe we need to think about how we could just incorporate more of it and make sure that we're fostering and encouraging people who might have an interest in doing some, just by making it more publicly, hey, we'd really like you to perform.
And 2 points. One, even if you check out the hall for acoustics the night before, when there's tables and chairs and people filling the hall, that changes the acoustics. So the testing it the night before isn't necessarily going to put you to an advantage. The other thing, one of my most successful performances was about 10 years ago, when Giovanni and Lucia were stepping up as Baron Baroness of Skraeling. And I did a dramatic reading of Beowulf for children. And I had my son and a bunch of other middle teens acting out what was happening in front. We had the hall in stitches. I couldn't even watch what the kids were doing. I had to concentrate on the page, and all I could hear off to my side was bumping and bumping and all this. And yeah, when Beowulf pulled off Grendel's arm and started beating him with the end of it, we had screams from the audience. It was awesome. So
that's one thing to consider would be group storytelling as a way of helping to capture that hall. If you have more performers, that's and it also helps with the fact that because unlike songs, stories can be difficult to memorize, but if you're trying to read, you're often you're not projecting necessarily to the hall there.
And a lot of times people are not good at reading and performing. There are people who feel that just reading a story is the same as performing a story or telling a story, and it's not. There's a world of difference between just reading off a piece of paper and performing. And we see this with singing bards as well, although it's not quite so bad or quite as obvious a problem. Sorry, go ahead, Emer.
Just going back to what Valdr said about how the head table was losing focus, so the rest of the audience seemed to follow. That kind of goes back to the very, very beginning of this discussion about getting patrons. And we can, there's an idea in Irish culture that bards have immunity against retaliation by the kings. They can say anything and know that because their true opinion is valued, they won't be retaliated against in any way. And I take that part of bardic duty seriously. I think all of us need to remember that we can counsel kings. We can go to their majesties or their highnesses or the baron and baronesses and say, hey, look, I'm not happy with how things are. I feel like I can't do my art. What can we do together to make it more bard friendly? Or, I think that the rest of the hall might listen better to us. I have a story to tell that's going to be, that fits, has a point with what's happening today or whatnot. And I think if you were my patron in that, if you were shown to be paying attention to that, then other people would follow suit. And I know it can be intimidating. I've done this with various nobles in the past. And, it's the same as saying, like, going up to them and saying, hey, I don't think this new bard is getting enough of a chance to show us what they can do. Do you think maybe you can request something from them because that will help them feel wanted and included? We have this ability and this power as bards to help guide our patrons and teach them how to do their job the way that we'd like to see, and teach them how to support us.
This is one of the things that I would really love to see being part of the responsibility of the kingdom bard or the baronial bard, or is when they are approached to be the bard of the fill in the blank area, that they sit down with their patron and say, okay, what kind of music are you wanting? What kind of performances are you wanting? Are you wanting stories? Are you wanting poems? Are you wanting songs? Are you wanting uplifting songs? What is your mood today, my lord, in terms of the feast? How many people do you want singing at feast? Do you want us to sing to you the whole time you're eating? Or do you want to be chatting to the people beside you? What is your will? Find out what their will is and cater to it. And then that way, when they have expressed their desires, their interests, their aims, when they fall short, because let's be honest, they're human, they probably will at some point, we can go up to them with strength of purpose and say, this is what you said you wanted. Have you changed your mind? Is there a way that you can show these bards the respect that you are expecting as well? Because this is all part of the game.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
A similar point, Emer, but perhaps on the other side, because we're talking about our patrons and talking about supporting new bards. That's something we should also talk about. I think we should. It's like, how do we encourage new people to take up bardic? Rodrigo, I may put you on the spot here as the newest bard in this company, as it were. Do you have any thoughts about just for you personally, what has been helpful, or what have you been finding challenging to you performing? Because I know you have performed a couple times in the past.
I mean, for me, there wasn't much of a it was just kind of was a natural part of my joining the SCA, because my first exposure to the SCA was through recordings of music by bards from Elder. So I'm not really the best case because really the Bardic part is what drew me to the SCA.
Fair enough.
For someone who does not already have a reason to join the Bardic community, I don't know what to tell you.
Could I put something forward?
Please do.
So as the partner of someone who is very, very interested in becoming part of the Bardic community, I have been assisting Margaret with answering a score of questions on the very, very much unwritten rules and norms of how Bardic circles work. And it occurs to me that it could be of immense benefit to our patrons, our audiences, new bards, and be an accessibility point for neurodivergent people who would like to participate to have notes of what the expectations are. Everything from how long can you expect to hold an audience's participation for a song or a storytelling piece. Because they were asking, like, can I perform something that's 5 minutes long? And I was like, I think so, but I'm not even sure. What are the rules around what you can perform, the time period?
And saying you want our secret rules to be written down and available?
Oh, I know.
The plebs might get hold of them.
It would be a really interesting thing to co-author.
Yeah.
With if we could start a Google document or something that people can join in on, and I'm personally envisioning it sort of like a blog post thing, with things like, what can I expect? Where do I sit? Notes for audience, notes for performers. I was also wondering, I just know we're going to run out of time soon. We talked about the ability to keep Bardic circles going even after pandemic risk of gathering has passed. I know that the Cooks Guild in Eldermere has been hosting a weekly meeting and having different people talk about different subjects, or different roundtables on this kind of recipe, or all about sourdough or whatnot. Do we as a Bardic College want to start having, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly or whatnot, meetings where we can get together and say, like, today we're going to talk about workshopping how to perform a story, or today, I have mundane degrees on my wall that say I know stuff about medieval poetry. Do people want to learn something about that, or do people want help learning how to do poetic scansion, or do people want to do some vocal coaching stuff? Like,
I think that's a great idea.
You can do
I
this.
agree.
You have the ability to do this. It's really a matter of like picking a night that doesn't conflict with everything else.
For the purpose of, I've got this. I worked on this new story. I want to bounce it off everyone. I want critique. I want input. If we're going to be a college of like-minded people, we should gather and share what we know, rather than exist in separate little bubbles and occasionally come together at events. I love the idea of collaborating and sharing our skills and our, or even just our thoughts on, hey, that sounded really great, or you want to try, have you ever considered trying this? But the idea of meeting and actually sharing what we love to do, I think that's the first step that we have to take if we're going to make the Bardic community in Eldermere the way we've been talking about this whole Moot. If we're going to garner that audience etiquette, if we're going to, in essence, rebuild the Bardic tradition in Eldermere, because we used to be the kingdom that sings. We're not anymore. We're now the kingdom that sings along, and I really have been wanting that to to come back as someone who remembers that time was and quite frankly, that entire time period literally shaped who I am in the society.
I am sorry, Valdr. I am going to have to cut you off. Just because we've only we're running out of time here. Lithwin, I know you had a comment earlier and you got kind of cut off there, so I want to give it to you as last word, and then we all have to escape to the next class in.
So I was just going to say that when I joined I joined for fighting and chainmail initially. I didn't go to the Bardic circles because I didn't think I had anything period enough to begin with, and sort of showing people how musically flexible SEA Bardic really is, it would be important too. I think that's what kept me out of the circles for the first 3 years I was in the society, and I had been a semi-professional blues musician.
Blues magician. We're on to you.
Yes. Freudian slip there. Meaning that I got paid, but not where it wasn't losing money from not working my pizza delivery shift on the same night. If I can just give one little piece in there, we are at the beginning stages of turning Warriors and Warlords North Shield's big summer event to an online event like this. And I'm the Bardic coordinator for that. So it's going to be in July. We'd love to have people, and I'll be at the circle tonight. So.
Yay, North Shield.
Wonderful.
Hey,
Well, I want to thank all of you for coming there. If you guys want to continue this conversation, I recommend going. There's the full social room, which you can chat away merrily to your heart's content. But alas, we will need to vacate this room. So thank you very much. I think this has been a very good discussion, and I look forward to seeing you all, or most of you at least, tonight for